everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I have a new book from Fantagraphics, Núria Tamarit's Daughters of Snow and Cinder. This is an interesting book. It's really well illustrated, really fun fantasy story, but it's got an interesting worldview that made it hard for me to read. And it was just a surprising entry from Fantagraphics as well, in that it feels kind of like a young kid's fantasy book, but then also it can't really be that, and I'll point out why, just because of some of the intensity. I guess like even right here, you know, you've got these dogs getting killed right out the gate, and there's some sex scenes and stuff in it that take it out of what I assume most parents would be comfortable giving their kids. So the main characters here are Tala and Joanna. They are women in a pretty harsh world, and they take up work with a character, Matway. Matway's like this, big, I don't know, kind of pirate thiefy like character. Most people aren't willing to give the women work, but he's kind of like, I guess mercenary maybe be the best way to say it. Like this mercenary merchant pirate character that's willing to give them work, and then basically bounces without them. And so the majority of the story is like these two characters individually trying to catch up and then ingratiate themselves to this group. Throughout the book, there's a real sense of a desire to return to nature, and there's a strong, I would say, misandrous element to this book, which is what made it a little bit hard for me. It's another thing that's like, I don't know that I would give a kid this book, because it's painting a very vociferous anti-man picture that's a bit uncomfortable for me. But I do think there are a lot of beautiful imagery throughout the book, and it was a pretty fun, compelling read. It's just the worldview within it I found, uncomfortable. Obviously, as a man, it was a bit uncomfortable. But I do think that there's some real interesting lessons in here too, like this character is saying, you can't truly appreciate what you don't know deeply. She taught me the name of every plant and every animal that lived in our realm, to treat nature with benevolence and take only what is needed, to love nature like a mother, a sister. But I do think that there's something about this like call to know your land intimately that makes a lot of sense to me now that I moved out of California and moved to Alabama. And have a lot of nature in my area. Like I have basically forests in my backyard, and in California I never had animal life as part of my day-to-day, but now we have like a cast of characters that we've gotten to know that shares our property with us. There's some squirrels, there's some chipmunks, there's a cardinal and his little girlfriend, there's a squirrel and his family, and there's a family of crows that Tori's getting to know and feed. I've had to get to know the plant life around here to make sure it's not poison ivy, and we got a huge wall of kudzu, so I'm always having to maintain the property and cut the kudzu. And I never got that connection to nature in California. And there really is something about especially getting to know the cast of characters of the animals in the area that makes it, I don't know, it's just like a richer experience. So it's funny to me that this is obviously coming from a more left-leaning political standpoint, being the misandrous feminist revenge fantasy that it is, but also it has in my experience, when I've lived in states that lean that way politically, I didn't get the experience that is being described in this book. And then when I now live in a much more conservative right-wing state, I get the experience that they're describing in here. And so it's always my feeling about what I'm seeing in the world is that it's like a Rubik's Cube, where the sides haven't just been twisted to actually have the colors sync up. And I don't know how to solve that, but it's really frustrating when I read books like this, that it's like, I don't know, the places that supposedly have these policies and politics are the places where I didn't encounter these things. The book makes a pretty big argument also against capitalism, or at least the idea of money. These characters here are getting the corn, the lemon quince, and then are talking about, in this man's world here, all dreams of wealth depend on a tiny yellow rock. So we have this really actual valuable gold. Back home, wealth wasn't the worth of gold medal, it was something else, this other gold. It was the golden color of sun or maize, lemon king. So like that color itself can be attached to other things that have value. And that's the fair argument. Like when you do live closer to nature, you do realize, that there's a direct value there that's not abstract. It's not put behind any kind of, simulation, any kind of virtual thing. Like Alan Moore's, one of my favorite Alan Moore quotes from his book Jerusalem is, you can't forge a cow. Like you can forge a coin, but you can't forge a cow. And same thing, like corn is corn is corn, you could use it. So all of that like is very well expressed in the book. Like you can see throughout here, there's this really charming fantasy art. And it's hard not to want to get on board with that vision of the world, especially with the way that the world has gone lately. I feel like I see a lot of this. I've actually had a friend tell me it's called tradcore, tradition core, like this idea of getting back to the traditional in the sense of going back to small groups of people sharing land and just, but then this book like mixes that up with kind of this LGBTQ anti-man like state where it's just going to be a bunch of women living the traditional life together. I'm not sure. Anyways, here's one of the scenes that I would say would make it not probably for most people appropriate for their children. Especially because it gets a little weird here. She's like hugging this dog, and then that gives her like this kind of sexy dream about having sex with this dude here. So that's that combination's a little bit weird for me. And then the book from here just kind of devolves, I think, into this message that I just have a hard time getting on board with. As much as I enjoyed the story and the art, this kind of fantasizing about these utopias that don't exist. I couldn't help but think about my realm, about the bounty of its earth, about the land that united all women, the land of my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother before them, the land I might never see again. So just fantasizing about this world that never was and never will be, but I see a lot of that kind of return utopianism right now. Some really fantastic images in between chapters, but there's nothing quite this fantastical in the book. I think if there had been a couple big punchy images like this in the story, that would have really made it flow better. Here's another quote I found interesting. "We must protect the land our entire lives, and when we die, the land will live on like this tree, for whom we will be only a memory of strange foggy days gone by, which fades with time." So anytime her grandmother's like talking to her, I think there's a lot of wisdom in this. And like, I do agree that we have seemed to have lost touch with all of this stuff. And like I said earlier, being like having a gigantic tree like this in my backyard and just being back in the place with a lot of nature is reminding me of that part of, I don't think I ever experienced that, but it's speaking to something deeper in me. So I could vibe with that throughout the book. But then there's just a lot of things that just blame what's gone on men entirely. Like women have had no part in society. So like they couldn't have possibly contributed to anything that's wrong in society. This land hates men, and I don't want to be with them when it punishes them. So kind of this like fantasy that the land's going to get back at us at some point. Some really beautiful colors throughout. I think this is actually my favorite piece in the book right here. Here's some more just kind of funny. "You don't know how much I've missed holding someone in my arms after being alone for so long. It doesn't matter that we don't really know each other. This is all I need." So it's like, just hug anyone. Any old person will do. It's great. Also, I've traveled across the ocean, and on behalf of all women, I defeated those men who had taken everything from us. The men who wanted to make us believe we were worthless and that they could exploit us, annihilate us as they did to the land. I don't think that you necessarily need to say the men. Like, just the people would be fine. There are definitely people out there who will do it, and it's not only men, it's not all men. So again, it's just kind of frustrating. And then at the end, with how much this author was talking about men, it was hard not to read this statement as pointed at men rather than just other instances of the human race. But I do think, or the human species, I should say, I do think that is intended to talk about sharing the world with other destructive humans rather than just men. But given that so much of the book is just like the evil men did this, it's hard not to read this are we so different from them? Am I not part of the same species at the root of an irredeemable evil? Will we be able to live in harmony with the living creatures of this land one day? So I get the desire that's expressed throughout this book, but it's too much blaming it on men, and it's too much seeing it's this fantasy that I've been seeing play over and over and over, that there used to be some state of the world where like struggle for resources hasn't existed, that people kind of just learned to get along with nature around them and it was all peachy keen. If that was the case, we wouldn't have developed agriculture and society. Like, there were struggles in those return to the land type of lifestyles that people are looking for, that were fetishizing and ignoring what the difficulties were. If there were difficulties, we wouldn't have wound up with the society that we had today. So it's a bit frustrating. There's another book that I just got, Adherent by Chris W. Kim from Conundrum Press, that I'm going to review, that basically has this same vibe to it, but I think it handles it a little bit more maturely and a little bit more intelligently, with the idea that, that's a state that A, never was, B, even if it was, you can't get back to it. Because it would just repeat itself. We would just repeat. We might be able to go back there for a generation or two, and like you could so choose to live if you wanted to. But this idea that, will we all ever one day be able to live in harmony with the other living creatures of this land? Like, no, obviously not. So this book just feels like a bit of a throwaway statement to me. As fun as it could be, it's trying too hard to make a statement, and it diminishes where its worth could be because of that. If that stuff would have been tamed down a little bit less explicit, and this had focused on a more mythological structure instead of more of a straightforward, like, let me lay out exactly what the problem is, it's men and how they've dominated nature, I think this could have been a really good, charming kids book. But, it has the sex scenes in it, and it's just not something that I personally would give to any kid to try and teach them this lesson that it's men's fault. But there could have been a really nice message about returning to nature throughout this that could have been given to kids. So I think this is a book that's really fun, really well illustrated, but kind of shoots itself in the feet by trying too hard to land its message, or having too much kind of anger driving the message, rather than hope for what could be. It's anger about what has been. So just not a strategy that I appreciate in books. But I'm not going to say it's a bad book, because I think it's really well written, really well illustrated. Like I said, when you get these big, amazing images, it really, really lands. A few more of those would have been good. More like tightly woven into the story rather than just the chapter openers. But overall, it's a good book. If you like the art and you kind of like these type of fantasy stories, you might still want to check it out. But it is pretty political book, I think, overall, in a way that was distracting to me from the successes of the book. So that's Daughters of Snow and Cinder by Núria Tamarit, out from Fantagraphics. If it's the type of book you're interested in, definitely grab it. If the stuff I'm describing is a turnoff to you, then I would avoid this book. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel and want to support us, there's two ways to do that. First way is through our Patreon. We have 2 different tiers of engagement on there. The first one comes with just early access to the videos. The second one gets you exclusive access to previews of the personal projects that Sean and I are working on, as well as the ability to vote in and help control our ongoing webcomic experiment, Prane Day. Any of the money that we make from that would just turn back in to help us buy the books that we review. So that's very much appreciated. We're just trying to turn that back into the community. And then if you want to support Living the Line itself, the best thing to do is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line books. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his projects now. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of 2 characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really, really beautiful, and has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books?